Howdy, howdy ho. Are you a pre-pubescent adult? Then I should confirm that Thrustmaster does not make sex toys. But you know what? With a name like that, they really should, because I can tell you right now, this has the motors to get the job done. Let's just say it's not a whole lot to look at. The shape and form of the T300RS steering wheel base isn't exactly exuding any sort of modern designs, and the cables coming out of it are unsightly unless you're setting this up in a full sim racing cockpit rig. Conversely, the steering wheel is definitely easier on the eyes as it clearly focuses on my preference, function over form. But then we're back to dated. The pedal base just has this old appearance, and while the pedals themselves are decent, they're also a bit tiny. This is one of those times you just give it a gentle pat and remind it that looks aren't everything. And in that lies a bit of truth. The steering wheel has a bit of heft to it, which helps stabilize it during gameplay and keeps it from feeling cheap. And while the paddle shifters have a nice click sound to them, the click itself does feel a bit hollow. They also moved the power brick internally, which is a godsend compared to my older Thrustmaster. In fact, the coolant fans are also much quieter compared to my older one. They also seem to have improved the internals. There's a lot less noise generated when in use, though that could also be attributed to this being brand new. Unfortunately, the pedals are still a weak spot. The plastic often creaks under heavy and rapid use and is weak against lateral movement, as my foot would sometimes come at a slight angle and cause this plastic to rub. Overall, the hardware isn't bad per se, but it definitely isn't premium materials and feel, except the steering wheel itself. It's also not one of those living room lookers, if you know what I mean. Now we're talking the real meat and potatoes here, and this part is really important. Is this motor powerful enough to give me a hand job? Well, I can tell you right now, this has more than enough torque to work your wrists, forearms, and shoulders. I mean, you could always turn it down for a more casual experience, but nah, grip this baby and let it thrust you all over the place. It's important to note, of course, that the actual force feedback is game dependent. It all depends on how the game wants to use it. Since I played GT7, what I can report is that the cues they've used are both unrealistic but rather easy to feel. A clear example is that at the limit of traction, the steering wheel does not resist you in a real car, but it does in GT7, which is an unrealistic way of telling you that you're at the limit of traction at the current steering input angle. More subtle road feel is there, fortunately, and the wheel does a good job of simple vibrations like curbs and dirt. An easy way to give it a test for how well it transmits feel and how strongly it does it is connecting it to a PC and using the software to run tests. In summary, while the force feedback is game dependent, the ability for this motor to transmit its intended function is good. The belt, the motor, and the setup are all doing their jobs well. It's rather important to know that the T300RS is a mid to beginner's level steering wheel. There are far more expensive options, but I started back on Gran Turismo in the PS2 days with the Logitech force feedback wheel, and good is more than enough for me and probably many others. So while I'm not an official race car driver out in the real world, I've done enough in the real world to tell you that a racing sim will never properly mimic the physical forces of an actual vehicle. Knowing this then, the conclusion is quite simple. If you want to learn about real world racing mechanics and you want to get into sim racing so you can start feeling the type of conditions you have to handle, then this wheel is a good one. If you're a hardcore racing sim fan, then you probably already bought a top-of-the-line Fanatic and a full cockpit rig. For us normies, the T300RS is more than enough. For real race car drivers though, this is all probably just fun and games. I'll see you next time on the Gaming 5.